What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. The boys are back. We've got Dan back this week. We fired Phil. It was a great week, but Phil had to go. We brought Dan back. So we're just gonna do a little conversation tonight. We're gonna talk about bodybuilding, kind of what the three of us are on a mission to do within the sport, individually, collectively through Natty News. I was just telling these guys through my circle, through Natty News, and I'm sure from time to time they're getting messages as well with people with questions. People just kind of wanting to hear our thoughts on certain subject matter, like we did last week with James and I with Phil, talking about like balancing bodybuilding with family life, and that episode seems to be pretty well reviewed, and people really liked kind of that side of it. So we're gonna try to mix this stuff in from time to time where it's a little bit less like bringing someone on for an interview or kind of show conversation, and just like kind of give you guys a bit more of insight as to like the three of us as individuals, but obviously kind of encompassing within bodybuilding. So
Mm.
let's let's let Dan lead, because I think Dan's probably the most interesting of the three of us with regards to bodybuilding, because he's in it. If anybody's in
Mhm.
it, Dan's fucking in it. So Dan, let's back up just a hair with like what got you into bodybuilding, and then like what's kept you, and what's pushed you in the method that you pursue bodybuilding in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. If you can organize my thoughts, that's helpful. Yeah, starting in bodybuilding, started in the gym and just in the summer for hockey. That's pretty much how it started back in high school. Started lifting for hockey, mostly just in the summers, that sort of thing. And then eventually stopped playing hockey, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this gym thing more. And then my
Yeah.
training sessions got more and more frequent. And I'm like, okay. I originally was like, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I think I said those words. That was over a decade ago, but
That's a
probably
liar.
probably 2011 ish time frame. And then, but eventually over time, I'm like, I kind of like this thing, and
Yeah.
uh, started dabbling in powerlifting and taking the hypertrophy stuff more seriously. It was a progression over time. Competed in 2018, and originally was still kind of planning on doing the hybrid thing, like the hybrid power building sort of thing.
Yeah.
But realized at 2018 competing that year, I was like, I'm okay at this thing. I wasn't great at powerlifting, and I had, uh, you know, just being pigeonholed into certain movements just wasn't quite right. And I'm like, I need to just put everything into bodybuilding. So, um, since 2018, just been fully invested in bodybuilding, and my personality is very much when I do something, I do it right. So.
Dan does that. Um,
Yes.
what did you find so like attractive about bodybuilding kind of once that like 2018, and you're like, okay, like I did this competing thing. You're like, oh, I really like this. I'm decent at it, but like what was kind of like scratching your itch with it?
Yeah, it wasn't even necessarily the competitive thing. Like I absolutely love competing. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. I love competing, but it's more so the pursuit of chasing my full potential that
Okay.
I think enthralls me more than
Right.
competing. Like the competing stuff, I love it. Like I absolutely love it. Anyone that's seen me at shows, or you guys have seen me at shows, a lot of people have seen me compete, and like it's like I love competing, but like
Right.
on the day to day, that's not necessarily the major thing that drives me. It's more so like, how can I push my potential? Where's my potential? And how
Okay.
can I continue to push the envelope? Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think there's like two different like main camps of people that pursue bodybuilding, from a like a truly competitive, like
Yeah.
I want to win X title, X pro card, whatever. And then the other people that are like, I want to do this to the best of my ability. I'm going to
Yeah.
execute as best I can to a T with the utmost accuracy, and where that takes me, sick. But at least I know for,
Yeah.
and I think that's the cool thing about bodybuilding. This is something that I've said to clients, where it's like you can truly do this for as long as you want, because it's
Mhm.
so easily manipulated based on your situation, as you age or as you work around injuries or whatever. like you can still be a very, very like dedicated bodybuilder to the degree that you are, which is more than the two of us sitting here on this podcast with you, and still see it through for you're a decade in and you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 decades left if you really wanted it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long term game, and that's kind of why I stay in the natural side. Big reason I stay in the natural side is that it
Yeah.
does have that long runway.
Did you
But
have any inclination to ever go enhanced before?
I have like it was kind of like like a maybe 7 years ago, something like that. Like I was like I'm like I see it as like a 50-50 thing,
So
but
in your early
um
20s, you kind of were like, man, maybe.
yeah, like it's like maybe like if down the line I decide like
Right.
I want to take things further and really progress things, but I mean at least for me, like I eventually unlocked like every year I feel like I've unlocked just a new level of growth and just been able to continually progress um, in my physique and in my body weight. And when we talked about like the DEXA numbers, and I was like, we talked about it. I was just like,
Yeah.
what? That doesn't even compute. I mean, you would have showed me those if you would have showed me those numbers when I was 20, you'd be like, yeah, I'd be like, yeah, he went enhanced. Like that's how I would think about it. So it's like
Yeah.
there's higher ceilings than I think a lot of people realize. So, you
Right.
know,
Now, from the competitive side of the sport,
yeah.
do you have you always had like is there anything like as an athlete you're like I definitely want to achieve ABC throughout my competitive career? Like do you have any of those kind of candles lit for you?
Yeah, I do. I
'Cause, like
mean,
for
I would
example,
like,
for those that don't know, like you earned your OCB pro card early on.
yeah,
You've openly acknowledged that like maybe it wasn't the hardest show, but still an achievement in itself. So like
yeah.
you know continue on, like what else is kind of like, okay, if I was to say like there's maybe 1, 2, 3 things that in my career I would love to achieve, what would that list maybe look like?
Yeah. At this point in time, I would like to get a WNBF pro card. I think that is the most difficult pro card to get. I think the criteria and the challenge of it, I think, is the highest of the standard is the highest of any pro card. Obviously, it can vary from show to
Yeah,
show, that sort of thing, but that's something I would like to achieve. I would like to improve my Mr. America placing. I would like to crack like a top five in,
sure.
in a a pro
Like
lineup.
pro bodybuilding.
Um, yeah, so that in open bodybuilding, yeah. So my everything lies in open bodybuilding at this point in time. I don't intend to do classic physique anymore. So
Well, yeah, which is interesting that you earned your pro card in classic, right?
in classic, yeah, it was kind of just like the first show I did. I think it was more of like a smoother introduction for me rather than putting on the thong, right? So, which in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have been as it probably wouldn't have been as bad as I thought at the time because I stepped on stage and it didn't even feel that unnatural or weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my heart's in bodybuilding. So I don't really have a like a background or family or many people in my circle that are into bodybuilding. So I kind of stepped into it, on my own, so to speak. So
Yeah.
uh navigated the waters to the point where I'm like, yeah, bodybuilding is where my heart is, like open bodybuilding.
Sweet.
And I think that's where my physique strengths lie as well. So
So for you as a whole, it's the all encompassing, like I'm dedicated to this craft. This is what I'm putting all my eggs in.
yeah.
Couple like, checklist along the way, but I'm just in the game until I can't no more, pretty much.
Yeah, to a large extent. Like, how much muscle can I actually put on? How crazy can I look? Like
Yep.
how many times can I get on the Natty or Juice Reddit thread? All that fun stuff.
Sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
Um, outside of bodybuilding, do you have, I don't know if I've ever actually asked you about this, like hobbies, interests, like do you have anything that you kind of turn it off for?
Um, yes and no. I mean, bodybuilding is definitely my main interest. But I mean, I can talk philosophy. I listen to Jordan Peterson a lot. I do a little bit of politics. I'm interested in that a little bit. Um,
But
I
like,
do watch a little bit of hockey. I do some
yeah,
stuff on the side, like
yeah,
I keep myself informed with things, interesting topics. I'm an engineer too, so like technical topics and nerd
Right.
stuff can
Yeah.
interest me. I do like work with numbers, working in spreadsheets, that sort of thing. So
So you're
a lot
not
of that
like,
I integrate into bodybuilding, but
yeah. So you're not like bodybuilding 24/7 in your head, like all the podcasts, all the content, like you separate yourself a little bit
a little bit,
when
yeah.
needed.
I mean, I do listen to a lot of the podcasts, but a lot of my podcasts aren't necessarily always bodybuilding
Yeah.
centric.
Yeah.
But it's what I think about. I'd say a large percentage of the time of my day.
The
It's more
philosophy,
so just like the nuts and bolts, right?
yeah.
Of just like what
Yeah.
do I need to do today to
Yep. Yep.
right.
The philosophy
But
stuff's cool because anytime you and I have linked up, we've always kind of like eventually navigated into those conversations, whether it's been like when you've been up here for
yeah,
dinner, or if we're puttering around at like Mr. A or something like that subject matter comes up, which I think is you know, it's subject that I'm interested in too. So it's something that
yeah,
I
I know
appreciate
you are.
about you that
Yeah,
we
I
can
always
we can talk about
love
that kind of stuff. And
I love chatting about that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think it's important. So okay, so that sums Dan up. So the man's in the game. So that's kind of one big side of the camp where you're pretty much like, my life is very much focused on bodybuilding. How much juice can I get out of this bodybuilding squeeze? You know, basically like my life is designated towards that. James, your turn, my man. What
Yeah, where do
what
we
brought
start?
you
I
to this
feel like
crazy space?
I feel like I'm quite the opposite. Um, so this initial aspect is very similar. I played college soccer. I played multiple sports throughout my whole life, but college soccer is where like my athletic career ended, per se. And I was used to, having this time commitment throughout the week and had been training for sports performance, which had slowly transitioned into like a bodybuilding-esque or powerlifting, power building hybrid towards the end of that career. And then when I had no other like athletic endeavors with soccer, it was just kind of like, well, let's just continue to go to the gym because that's what we do and want to stay in shape. However, I, powerlifting was Dan's thing that he kind of dabbled in very briefly. I dabbled with a lot of other things, always kind of kept bodybuilding as a baseline. One sec.
Kids and such.
Yeah, you want to say
Special
hi?
guest. Hi,
Yeah,
Bella.
special guest. All right, love you. Love you. Good night, Natty. But yeah, so I dabbled with a bunch of other things. It started out, CrossFit was interesting to me because of like the athletic endeavors of it and like truly testing your body's limits, aerobic and anaerobically and all that fun stuff. And then I quickly realized I hate cardio and like throwing up every workout wasn't fun because I'm very competitive and I wasn't good enough at it to be like efficient. So I was just muscling through everything. So I was just beating my body up and I said, well, that's probably not a great idea. I'm not a strong individual. I don't have good leverages, so powerlifting was out. So, but I would always come back to bodybuilding, right? I'm doing these other things, but I still hit my like 4 days a week bodybuilding. And it was kind of like, all right, let's throw in a CrossFit workout once a week or twice a week, or let's, do my, PH3 from Lane Norton, where I've got like my bench squat deadlift day. And
I ran that too. Yeah.
yeah, that's a brutal program, by the way. If you want to look that up, it'll crush you because I think you're deadlifting like 3 times a week, squatting 3 times a week, benching 3 times a week. It's pretty painful. And then actually, I've come to realize that I'm probably a better like soccer athlete, and then I picked up rugby than I am a bodybuilder. I actually was pretty talented at rugby, and if I pursued that, probably would be better long term than what I am as a bodybuilder. But at that point in time, when I was getting to that sport, which was later, I had a family and I had a career. And it came down to honestly the time commitment of it all, right? For a team sport, you're practicing multiple times a week. I was having travel on the weekends to compete regularly. I was having to travel just for practices. And it just wasn't something that I could do long term. And I knew I wanted something that I could fall into and stay in shape and be healthy long term, right? So the team sports kind of fell to the wayside eventually, and here I am now, right? So over the past couple of years, it's been very much like bodybuilding is where I'm going to stay. I do enjoy it. I like challenging myself. Um, I always knew I wanted something to compete in, and now like I will continue to compete simply for the fact that I feel like you need to test yourself, right? Like for anyone to feel like an athlete, you can't just go and practice. There has to be that next level, right? And that's what stepping on stage is. So even if my career doesn't have the runway that maybe both of yours does, because I'm very realistic of like, for me to win a pro card in certain federations is probably a combination of luck and just sticking it out long enough. But that might be where like the highest pinnacle I reach is just attaining that pro card, right?
Right.
So, and if that's the case, that's completely fine with me. I'll continue to compete just because I want that test. And I want to, like, am I improving? Did I improve on my last time? That kind of thing. And I'm realistic that what's the term I'm looking for? I'll probably be more better known for what we're doing here or as a coach than I am, or as a physical therapist within the space or anything like that, than I am as an athlete, right? No one's going to put up a poster of James Johnson on the wall like I might want to for like Brian Whitaker or Berto or Doug Miller or any of those people, right? So, yeah, realistic about that.
You might put your
Um,
face in a shirt at some point, but
Yeah.
we'll do something.
Face shirts coming soon.
Yes.
teaser.
Did you have any follow-ups on that? Because I could
What
just talk
drew you to
today.
compete the first time though?
Yeah,
Like,
that
what were
was
you
my
like?
ego.
How'd you
That
find
was
out about? How'd you find out about bodybuilding? Like, a lot of people don't even know what bodybuilding is. Half people like ask me, "Oh, you do bodybuilding?
How
Like,
much? How much do you lift on
how
the?
much do you lift? Like, do you lift on the competition day?"
Yeah.
Like, no.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was purely my ego. I remember watching, and this is crazy. I remember in high school, I did watch like one bodybuilding show on TV. Had to have been like the Arnold or something, right, for it to be televised. And I remember seeing them and being like, "Whoa, those dudes are awesome looking," but like that's kind of weird that they're in speedos. And like that was my whole like bodybuilding exposure as a kid. Like it wasn't like I grew up in the gym, all that kind of stuff.
Is
I
it
grew up
how it's
watching
the
like the
norm
World
now?
Cup and everything. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
It's like now,
Um,
like a guy on stage, like, or
Yeah,
now it
and
doesn't
I
even
I
phase
would
me.
when I was learning how to lift, it was from like YouTubers who were like bodybuilders, I guess, maybe not even on the competitive side, but so I'd see that, but I never like to me it was like I want to look like them because realistically I know like I'm light framed, I don't have a big build, I've never been like genetically gifted like that, so it was like I'm lifting because I like to get a little bit bigger, but I don't think I'm going to compete. What finally drew me to compete was I was working as a personal trainer and an athletic performance coach while in grad school. And one of the other trainers there did compete with the OCB in physique. And I saw him and I was like, oh, if he could do it, I could look better than that. And that truly was it. Like, as egotistical as it is to say that, like, that was the whole introduction. So I figured out, like, hey, what's OCB? You start looking. Luckily, I was in Syracuse at the time. There's the show in Syracuse. So it was super easy, low barrier to entry for me. Prepped myself, started learning. And that's when I, like, fell into the rabbit hole of, like, here's 3DMJ, here's Revive Stronger, here's AJ Morris, Jack Thorburn. Like, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And, like, now I'm in it, right? Because it just worked. I was in grad school for physical therapy, was working as a personal trainer. This was kind of like putting it all together almost. And I learned so much about like anatomy and lifting from school, but also the other way around. When I would get to like my exercise science classes, I had this background from doing it in person and testing on myself. So it worked out for me.
I
So
think
you're
having a show really close to you to dip your toes in the waters is so not is so underrated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I stayed at my apartment the night before and I did my own tan and, it was super low stress for that first time. If I would have had to travel multiple hours, I can't say that I would probably have done it.
so yours is like a really like an intrinsic. I want something to like compete in to challenge myself that I can kind of
Hmm.
put my efforts into, similar to Dan, right? Put my efforts into and pursue for a long period of time.
Hmm.
Uh, not necessarily fixated on like I need to be this great athlete and build this massive resume of accolades, but I think like you said, like there's other areas that you've introduced through like physiotherapy, through Natty News and stuff that you can only add that kind of passion to just fuel this all encompassing thing, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and now they're all kind of like melted together in this somewhat messy goo that tends to work.
Is James Johnson.
Was there any bit
That's
of
me in my
chip-
life.
Was there any bit of chip on your shoulder that drew you to competing at all? Because I know that can be a large driver for you
I mean, I could say like the
in
whole
general.
story that everyone says of like I wasn't in good shape as a kid and I was kind of picked on and bullied, and but I that never bothered me from like the physical standpoint because I don't need to go into some of that history because I took care of those things in other ways, but I also knew like academically I was like, okay, cool, you can say whatever you want, but like I'm getting out of this town and you're not, and I'm gonna like go and like be a smart individual that betters the world. So I can't like that whole like, oh, I need to be big so I can like impress my bullies kind of thing. Like that never really stuck with me. Just
I was the
potentially in
bully. Let's
yeah. Potentially in the way where I felt like, and this is something I have reflected on a little bit. I
getting
was,
deep now. Let's go.
yeah. I was always good but not the best at team sports, right? Like I was a starter all 4 years in high school as a goalie, and then I worked my way up to being a starter in college, but like I wasn't winning awards for it, right? Like it was just kind of like by happen chance, a couple people got injured in college, and I was like third string, and now I'm first string. Or like in high school, like I was the second best in the region because the other guy had, a better team, or my older brother was a goalie too and won all these awards, and I followed in his footsteps and never quite did. So I mean, if you really dig down deep, maybe there was a little bit of like I need to do something different than the rest of my family, than my peers and all these other things, and something that I'm more so purely in control of based on my like effort. So I mean, maybe a little bit of that. um and everyone's a hothead when they're younger and they think that they're gonna like, I competed in some smaller shows, did pretty good early on, not as well as Dan, but like it kind of like fueled that. Where this last prep was kind of the like humbling experience of and doing this, right? Seeing all the athletes that are out there, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
like you're no, like that's you no.
Yeah.
So yeah,
There's
it's
good
it's
athletes
been
out
fun.
there.
It's been a
Yeah.
fun and humbling journey, and I've kind of settled into my role of I'll
Yep.
be middle of the pack if maybe, and I just gotta have a passion and love for it, which I do.
Yeah. I think that's like the biggest thing, right? Is if you actually like develop that passion for it versus like the people that, strike the iron hot right at the beginning, then get humbled and then they're like, oh, this isn't for me. And it's like, okay, like you just love the accolade and the fame and the praise. You didn't actually love the thing itself. Whereas like if
Mhm.
you can be like, I think Eric Helms is probably like the example that comes to mind, who's someone that like just kept on trudging forward and now all these years later finally gets like the WNBF pro card he was seeking for so long, right? And
Mhm.
not once did he, I'm sure there was probably times behind the scenes where it stung pretty hard and he maybe questioned himself, but never once was like publicly that I can recall being like, man, this is bullshit, like blah blah. Like he's always been just like, hey, I know I've got an uphill battle with all this as far as like structure and muscularity and stuff goes, but you know what? I'll
Keep
make
trudging forward.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll play the hand that I've been dealt the best that I can, and
Mhm.
sometimes the stars align and that person's rewarded. It just takes some time, right? And you know, your journey might reflect his a lot with what he's done with 3DMJ, with what he's done with
Mhm.
like mass and that kind of stuff. You
Mhm.
might be that role where it's like maybe it takes James 15 years, but look at the empire he builds while doing that climb. You know what I mean? Which is
Mhm.
sometimes even cooler to see than the guy that gets it year two.
Yeah. It's definitely at that point you cherish it, right? Like it's like this
100%.
culmination of years and years of effort. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, I hope it doesn't take that long, but if it does, it does. I'll just continue to compete and do what I need to do. But yeah, that's the bodybuilding side of things. The interesting thing, right? Because Dan, we know Dan's life. He's got his a couple hobbies. I know he's grew up playing hockey and all that. I grew up playing sports, but there's actually quite a few things I do that most people don't because I don't post about it, talk about it, show it, any of that. But like outdoorsman like
James is
stuff,
an avid hunter.
I grew up like in the boonies, me and my dad. I've been fishing since I could hold a rod. I started hunting when I was 10, like hiking and camping and like all that stuff, like being out in nature, I find a lot of peace in, and I just absolutely love doing. The idea of like sustaining off the land to some degree too, like I, fish for food and I hunt for food and we eat that. And you guys, if you've watched my story, I
Uh,
just got into some duck eggs and I might be buying some ducks here soon.
Foreshadowing is what that's called, boys.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, so my mother, and I don't think anybody knows this, my mother was an artist and always, I took all sorts of art classes all through high school, even through college, and actually for some time sold artwork. I have paintings that I've sold and sculptures that I've sold and lots of other things. So I enjoy, even the art of bodybuilding, and maybe that's why I went classic physique too, because of that. And that's something I'm still very passionate about and probably will return to when I have the time to. I just don't right now. So, like working with your hands and, whether it's physical out, like hunting, fishing, or like creating things, that's
Building
something that I do love.
garage
Yeah.
or
Like,
your things in your house. Yeah, you're
yeah,
always building.
renovating my house. I love working with my hands, whether it's from an artistic standpoint or a structural standpoint, like something, if I can take this space or this nothingness and like
Yeah,
create
nothing to
something.
something. Yeah,
I love that. I absolutely love that. I get a lot of reward out of it to the point where times when physical therapy is like really like I'm burnt out, I'm overworked. There's been times where I'm like, maybe I just become a carpenter because I just get a lot of like I enjoy
yeah,
working with my hands and it seems very simple, right?
yeah.
Like that simple lifestyle. So
Got country on the radio and a nice cool breeze on the back of your neck.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's periods of time recently, like when the Ari was born, I was out on paternity leave. I went and worked for my buddy as a, landscaper, and I enjoyed it because it's just that simple reward of like you made
Yeah,
that yard look beautiful. Like I did that. I can see that right now.
yeah.
That's that like instant gratification that we don't get with bodybuilding, that we don't get with physical therapy a lot of the time too, like because these changes take so long to happen. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely multiple facets of my life that I enjoy and cherish, but that I don't necessarily talk about all the time.
I think that is important for people to hear because, like, I mean, I didn't know. I've known you for how long? We're like brothers, and I didn't know you were like an artiste in the background.
So,
I knew
Yeah.
about hunting, I knew about the carpentry and that kind of stuff, but something like that, like, I think it just that multi-dimensional, and this is something that I'm trying to like really cultivate for myself as I kind of go into the next chapter of my life, like outside of bodybuilding, like what do I like? What do I love? Because I've found myself periodically getting really burnt out from bodybuilding.
hmm
It's a short-term thing, but I feel it creep in sometimes, and I'm like, okay, when these times happen, like where do I turn to? Um, I pick up the guitar, right? I spend time outside. I work with, like James said, I work with my hands a little bit, and I find it kind of resets me a little bit and grounds me, and kind of like then I go back to bodybuilding mentally or within the gym where it's like, oh yeah, I do genuinely love this. It just like you got me because it's such a huge part of my life where it can be like, okay, like it's not you, it's me. I need a breather real quick.
hmm
Um, which is something that like I didn't think I would ever experience until it became almost my entire life,
hmm
where it's like my passion meets my income meets this, where it's like almost every waking minute of my day is dedicated in some form or another to bodybuilding. And that's where I find, I was asking Dan about like podcasts and stuff earlier. Like I now try to go out of my way to like not do bodybuilding things when I don't have to. Like
hmm
like I don't really listen to like bodybuilding content anymore unless I'm really interested in something where like, like Steve's got a podcast coming with Cliff, like of course I'm tuning into that. But like
hmm
for a long time it was like I was listening to like Revive Stronger and Fuad's podcast and like anything AJ was posting and all this stuff, and I was like, "Oh my God, like I'm like addicted to this thing." And it got to
hmm
like, and then I'm doing it in my day-to-day practices as well and coaching and doing Natty News, and I'm like, "Okay, like it's so weird how I love it so much, but I know that eventually I hit a threshold where I'm like, I need some space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's important to have these other things to be able to like shut off that part of your brain. And I
Yeah.
think that's too like why I get the enjoyment out of like the yard work and the construction stuff, because that just is so different. Like there is no
There's
carryover.
no crossover. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can just be like a normal person and
Yeah.
yeah, it's somewhat nice.
Yeah.
But then I come back always.
And then it pulls me back in.
And then I see someone else prepping and I'm like, it's time to get shredded. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Leroy, favorite podcast is for talking personal stuff, non-bodybuilding podcast.
I think right now, Chris Williamson's leading that charge. Modern Wisdom.
Wisdom's great. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, he's got one coming out with Dr. Mike next week. So obviously I'm gonna watch that because Dr. Mike's a hoot. Modern Wisdom, Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett is a good one. I like business stuff. I really get a kick out of like business stuff, financial stuff.
You probably love the Hormozy podcast with Chris.
Yep. That kind of stuff I like. I like the philosophy stuff too. But I know I can I know I can go hard into stuff, and like this is definitely like speaking to like my personality, where like if I'm into something, I'll go hard into it, which I think has served me well in bodybuilding and in business. But I know I know I can get far gone where it's like, slow down, Skippy. Like, look, they're not out to get you. Come back to earth a little bit. James is probably earth a couple times.
I've noticed a couple of those where I'm like, all right, just chill out, man. Like,
yeah, chill out. But like,
the plastics aren't going to kill you.
Well, debatable.
I know you've changed that already. I can't bring you back on that one.
No, get me glass. But I really am trying to find that balance of like kind of well-rounded individual, which is something that I'm really trying to, again, like as I am now married, becoming a father, like I want to be like this person outside of just like this, good bodybuilder, good coach. Like I'm trying to kind of unlock those other facets of my life, and I think it keeps me level and kind of having those other areas like where it's like, okay, like today, in my spare time, like let's learn about some financial stuff. Let's learn about some like sustainability stuff, like James mentioned, like living off the land, like that kind of stuff. I'm very much like long-term interested in like that self-sufficient side of things, and financial independence and literacy with that kind of stuff, I think is
had a long conversation, not a long conversation, but conversation about that today.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. Like, and I think that's the three of us. I think that's part of the reason we mesh so well, is because we have like obviously this shared passion for bodybuilding, but I think we have very similar mindsets of a lot of other big areas in life. Like, like Dan just said, like the three of us in our group chat today, like we talked about financial shit for like an hour and a half back and forth in our messenger, right? And I think that's why we kind of mesh so good. But yeah, like that kind of stuff, I think it's what kind of keeps me moving forward and still like plucking through bodybuilding without, I think on the outside people be like, oh yeah, he loves this through and through. But I will be the first to say, like, there's days when I'm like I love training. I will, like, there's not a time where I'm like, I'm not training today. Like that doesn't exist. But it's just like I don't even know how to say it, but I just get like this weight on me of bodybuilding where I'm like, I just need to like separate you a little bit. Like when I train, like I'll throw on like classic country. I'll go in and just have a workout. I'll put my phone in airplane mode. So like there's no infiltration of bodybuilding that's possible in that time. And it helps kind of reset me a little bit. Yeah. Chaos in my head.
I cannot lift a country, so that's where we differ. I am
deload weeks for me.
I gotta be angry.
I got like 3 or 4 different playlists of like moods. And if I'm feeling like super, what's the word? Maybe somber. It's not sad, but I'm just like mellow. Then I'll get like acoustic, like Willie Nelson, and I'm just like feeling it. I'm getting wicked pumps. The sun's starting to come up in the garage. it's raying through the door, and you got classic Willie Nelson on, man. That's a vibe.
Teach their own. Teach their own. Not for me.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess what got me into bodybuilding.
I was gonna ask, yeah, we kind of
Yeah.
delved a little bit, but yeah, start
Well,
from more the beginning.
I like I won't go way back, but like I found the gym early. Was small. I wrestled in high school. I wasn't overly into sports like you guys. I was not about the team sport life. Did wrestling a little bit. Just and then vicariously into the weight room. And then my cousin's dad was a competitive bodybuilder at the gym that I went to, and just kind of like picked his brain every once in a while. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this thing a shot. So I did my first prep all by myself. If it fits your macros, I was in my fitness pal every day, like doing the whole thing, and did my first show in fall 2020, fall 2015. So nearly a decade ago. And I come second in that show. And I very much got hooked on the accolades of it, because I was like, okay, I got second, which means, and it was second out of like 15. So I was like, okay, might be onto something here. Did a show a couple weeks later, placed. So that was the first one I did was like fitness model. And for those that maybe get the reference, Cowboy Leroy. The
You're gonna put this in the to overlay this.
2 weeks later, I did my first like in bodybuilding, and I won that. And then I was like hooked. As soon as I won, it was like hook, line, and sinker. And then I competed after that. I did 2016. I won both shows I did. 2017, I won. And then 2019, I won. So I was fueled by the success more than anything. I loved it, and I definitely enjoyed the process. But I think my leading force early on in my competitive career was winning, and 100%. And it was because I kept winning, and because back then no one was really doing it. So it was like I was kind of like the guy in the town I was in who kept winning all these bodybuilding shows. Like I was in the newspaper and shit. Like I kind of felt like a celebrity, and that pushed me forward a lot. And then I did 2019. I had won, and then I did my first INBF show, and I come second to Dan Gideon. Gideon, I think that's how you pronounce your name, Dan. If you happen to be watching this, but I also saw Wesley Bremick, Greg's brother. Saw him in person the first time, and I think that was my first like real exposure to like what's possible naturally, because he was like 150 something pounds at like 5'4", and just a unit. Just incredible natural bodybuilder. I'd seen like big natural bodybuilders, but when I saw him, who was this complete, conditioned, jacked, no body parts missing, like truly incredible athlete, coached by Cliff. So it was like peak was nailed. I think that was kind of like a pretty good catalyst to like what has now propelled me to where I am now, where I'm like a hybrid of like, I want to do well, I want to win some things, and then a combination of like your guys, I want to pursue this long term and see what I can build out of it. And then now as a coach, I think is even more so kind of solidified like that role I want in the especially in Canada as a coach. And then now through Natty News, like those like three pillars I want to kind of take as big as I can. So yeah, my journey, I think of the three of us, is probably a lot more weight on achieving certain statuses and winning things, which is risky. And this is something I talk about on social media. It's something I talk about with my clients, because when you tie too much importance to winning or achieving something, you leave a lot of room for crumbling if that thing doesn't happen, which will happen at times. I know I'm not that good that any show I go to, I could win, especially as I continue to climb the ranks. But I think as I continue to climb those ranks, I think I'm maturing my mindset to know that like if I was at Mr. A in the lightweights beside Levi, I'm not that dumb. I'm not that delusional.
Mhm.
But especially like in 2022, like in the amateur shows, like I was not mentally at all entertaining the idea of losing. Like that wasn't even crossing my mind. Which I think you guys probably knew more than anybody, but if you followed me online, like I think it was pretty evident that like the winner's mindset was like those cards are on the table. That's not going to happen.
Mhm.
But again, like had I went to Mayhem and stood beside Josh and Josh beat me, I would have been cool with that. But I think like 99% of the time, the athletes I stood beside, I was like, nope, 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 I'm winning. And that fueled that 2022 because that was like all I was focused on.
Mhm.
You had that fire in you. You just looked around like, this is mine. This is mine. Every show.
Yeah, and
loved
like
it.
I
loved it.
had that I think this is one of the like social media can do you good in that regard, but also can do you bad because if people are blowing smoke, then it just dooms you. But between like people I trusted, you, Cliff, Greg, AJ, when I have people that I truly trust what they're saying and they're like, dude, like this is good, that fueled me even more, along with my own kind of like inner drive. So that
Mhm.
like steamroller mindset, like I had no, I was writing affirmations every day. Like you have no reason to think this isn't possible. Like I was like, I was Alex Hermosi in bodybuilding mode at that time.
Paid out for you.
Yeah.
Do you
So
do you feel like that mindset though is part of what caused? Because we know, and if anyone's followed you long enough, you did kind of step back from bodybuilding for a very brief period of time. You talked like it was going to be much longer,
yeah,
but right after that prep, there was like a 2-month period of your like, I'm going to do functional training
yeah,
esque
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
You hit it, and it was just like, now what?
yeah. And now what is exactly what it felt like. I think, for me, the WNBF pro card was like the pinnacle. It was my Olympia.
Mhm.
And from basically like 2020 to that show in particular, that exact show, which was the show that I come second in 2019, that was like all that mattered was that show,
Mhm.
that title at that show. And after I did it, it was this massive high. And then it was immediately followed by now what? Because I didn't look anything past that. There was no
Mhm.
pro debut. There was no pro show. There was no worlds. None of that was at all in my head. When that show was done, I felt like I'd finished bodybuilding. Like as far as like my career bodybuilding's done because I didn't know what was after this. From
Mhm.
2019, 2020, I knew that there was another chapter left and it was to that show and that
Mhm.
pro card. After that, I was like it was almost like the crowd had left the arena and I was standing there like I don't know what to do right now. And I felt like a combination of like the burnout of prep and then the massive high. Like you get the post show blues like under normal circumstances, but
Mhm.
mine was like exacerbated because it was like again like you know it was like my Olympia or winning the Super Bowl. Like that's what it felt like. And then yeah, I felt like kind of lost for a little bit and I was like, at that time even through prep, like I started kind of following people that were doing more of that like functional athletic stuff. And I was like really intrigued by it. And I was like, man, like that would be kind of cool. And it kind of gave me like when I was wrestling in high school and stuff, we did that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, like maybe I want to play around with that a little bit. Like that looked cool. Like it just looked very like interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and like you said, like there was that period, like, you know, I was talking like it was like over, but it was, 2 or 3 months where I was like playing around with stuff. And then eventually, like, you know, the post show blues dissipated, hormones probably regulated. I just felt good again because I felt shit for quite some time. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, like I do love bodybuilding. Like, what am I doing? You're not done yet. What are you talking about? So then it was like, okay, well, if this isn't it, what's next? And I think the bodybuilding landscape has made it very hard for me to determine that up until maybe the last like 5 or 6 months. I knew there was something next. I just didn't know what. And that's kind of where I'm at now, and kind of where I think I will continue to approach every season, where I don't know if there's this linear path. I think it's like every time I get ready to prep, it's like, okay, I'm going to make a list of achievements this prep, which is what I did last time, 2022. It was the OCB show. It was, I want to do an untested show. I want to win that WNBF pro card, ABC list. I think that's kind of how I'm going to probably approach every season, where I'm going to say, okay, I want to do this show for this reason, win this show for this reason, maybe line up a show with this person for this reason. You know what I mean? The competitor bucket list, there's probably like 10 names if I was to like make a list of people that I really would hope to get the professional stage shot with. You two being one of them for obvious reasons. That's kind of where I think I'll continue to approach prep, and then whatever comes of those seasons will come of them. But I think it's keeping me like, the competitive side of me is still getting its scratch, but also like the intrinsic value side of me is getting fed well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of people have to, right? Like, as you said, like the landscape of natural bodybuilding, especially right now, this past year, is very all over the place. So that linear path of like what's truly the peak, I think people have different ideas of what that is based on region, based on history, based on who they're friends with, based on who you want to compete against. So yeah, you just have to kind of address it as like, what's going to work best for me right now, because next year it might be different, and the year after that it might be different. And
well, that's just it, right?
Who knows 5 years from now what it's going to look like, right? So if you set this like, oh, I'm going to be off season for 4 years, and on that 5th year, this is what I'm going to do.
You might look around, it might be completely different. Like even that reel I posted, right, where it was like, POV, you achieved your biggest goal in bodybuilding. That at that time, that's what that was. Things have changed, and there's more for me out there. But in that moment, in that 2022 season, like that's what it was. Like there was nothing more that I wanted than that moment. And to have like Carrie there and you guys there and Ural there, and again, like even just like to go back to that same show 3 years later with the Ayo Tomasi brothers, who saw me back in 2019, who saw me come second, and to then it's the same trophy that I saw Wesley walk out with. Like that to me was like so intrinsically rewarding outside of just the title and stuff. And I think that probably meant more. If I really look back on it, it probably, the combination of all those different things meant more than just WNBF Pro. Because that meant a lot. But the other factors that made that moment and that, 2 or 3 days, like, I think that probably weighs more and means more inside. And that, I think that's the thing that if I was to like close my eyes and go back in my head on, I would look at other moments. There's pictures I have with you guys, and I vlogged the whole thing. Like I could look back on that and watch it back, and I would enjoy the 20-minute video more so than the very end when they're like, and your winner is. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, like, looking at next year, I want to do a local show for the sole reason of like 50 of my clients, friends, and family being there cheering and stamping that memory in my head, and having that outside of like, flying to this show because it's the most prestigious when no one's going to be there to support me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that you could get out of the sport if you allow yourself to, right? Without pigeonholing yourself. Just those experiences are huge. Like I think back, like us training together at Samson's, right? Like me being able to take you guys there. That was such a cool experience. Like those posing room photos with me and Dan.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We'll look back on those things, I think, more so than what the actual show was. Introducing you to Chick-fil-A for all your our American listeners. Yeah. Good
Chick-fil-A
times.
is good shit.
Backstage at OCB was awesome too.
Yes.
Yeah, like I have that video of like meeting you guys like in person for the first time. Like that.
That's even crazy that was the first time we actually met too.
Yeah, like almost like what, like 3 years we'd been doing this whole thing. Like, and I
Pretty
think
much.
that was like, you know, probably one of the best bodybuilding memories I have is because I could see it now sitting in that room and just like a crowd of
You're
people
out
at the door.
peeking
And
in
I'm
the
like
door,
just kind of
in
like
the door.
chilling as Mike's like running through the
And you
show. And I'm
just
like, yeah,
oh,
like it's just like I get goosebumps just thinking about it. But like those are the things that I think after what 2022 gave me, those moments is now I want to chase those. Because like the trophies are sitting here and they're dusty as all hell, and I never look at them. But those memories in my head, every once in a while, they replay, and I'm like, yeah, like that's what actually brought me. That's what bodybuilding is continuing to bring me, is those moments in time that like will be stamped forever. You know?
Yeah.
Fuck, I'm getting emotional.
I think that's where we got to close it out. That's the perfect way to end it, right? Like that's the message, right? Don't chase the trophies, don't chase the card or anything. Do it for what you value, and
Yeah,
do it for the memories and the friendships and relationships that you'll make along the way, as well as just, challenging yourself in a new way.
beauty. All right, people. Well, if you enjoyed therapy with the Natty News Boys, you know what to do. Give this video a like, and if you think we really need help, send it to our PayPal. But for real though, we appreciate you guys watching. And again, if you guys want to see more stuff like this, where it's just the three of us diving into some stuff, whether it's bodybuilding related or anything else within the sport or outside the sport, even let us know. We're happy to do this kind of stuff and kind of broaden the scope of what Natty News might be able to provide for the community. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.